In this lesson, we're just going to discuss some key definitions before we get heavily into the risk management process. And some of these terms you'll have seen before, so a little bit it'll act as a reminder of what they are. Our key definition is risk. So remember that risk is a combination of the probability of harm and the severity of that harm. So when we talk about risk, we always describe it as the combination of the probability of a harm occurring and the severity of that harm. A hazard is defined within the standard as a potential source of harm. Now, we'll get more into what exactly is a hazard in the next lesson, but you can think of a hazard as being a source of energy related to the use of the device, related to the characteristics of the substance, or related to a failure mode. And the first step in the risk management process is identifying the hazards and how they can lead to particular hazardous situations. So in the case of something like an AED, we might consider a hazard as a source of energy, the source of energy as the internal hazardous voltage. The line between hazard and risk is what are the foreseeable events that might lead to a risk. And in this case, that might be something like the operator is accidentally shocked because he either touches the patient as pulses are applied, or he touches the cable, or he touches the case. You have to assume at the start of the risk management process that, of course, the cables are uninsulated and the case is even uninsulated. So that would be the foreseeable events. And then we would think of the risk as the risk of the operator getting shocked. And then when we think about that risk, we ought to think about it in terms of probability of harm and severity of harm. So we can say that there would be a risk of the operator receiving an electric shock, which is likely, we'll say, the probability of that harm prior to the implementation of risk controls. You'd have to say it's likely. And also, it could be fatal. And if you didn't classify it as fatal, you'd have to classify it as fairly severe because it could lead to serious injury. Another one we might quickly think of is we could foresee the hazard of misuse. And an example of that would be that it is reasonably foreseeable to foresee that the operator misuses the AED and improperly places the pads in the wrong position on the patient. So as a result, then there would be a risk of improper pad placement, and we could describe that as being severe and probable. Okay, so the other key definitions are harm, which is defined as injury or damage to the health of people or damage to property or the environment. Injury, of course, being either physical or mental. Severity is another one. I think that one is quite intuitive. It's closely aligned with its normal English meaning. It's just the measure of the possible consequences of a hazard. So a hazard could be potentially fatal, or it could be much less severe, and the worst case severity might only be like a really kind of light pain. The next one here is risk control. So risk control is the process in which decisions are made and measures implemented by which risks are reduced to or maintained within specified levels, which also comes from the standard. And the next one we have here is residual risk, which is simply the risk remaining after risk control measures have been implemented. And the last one is, of course, safety, which is freedom from unacceptable risk. So safety and risk are very much intertwined. The more risk you have, the less safe a device is, etc. So I will leave that one there and I will see you in the next lesson.